Hi everyone, and welcome to tonight's PCS rally entitled United Against Austerity. And this comes following recent announcements and press stories about what can only be described as a really worrying and savage potential cuts agenda and austerity agenda by the new Labour government. My name is Martin Kavanagh. I'm the National President for PCS, and I will be chairing tonight's rally. I'm going to be joined by some absolutely fantastic speakers to make contributions about not only PCS's response, but also the wider movement's response to both the cuts to disability benefits, that are going to have a devastating impact on some of the most vulnerable in our communities, but also as well to PCS members. And we're going to hear from other members of the movement as well, including campaign activists and organisations around how we should unite and build a coalition of resistance against these savage attacks. Just by way of introduction, tonight's event is going to be in two parts. The first part is a rally where we're going to be hearing, as I say, from some fantastic speakers, and Nikki Evans, our BSL interpreter, is here to provide services, and a really warm welcome, Nikki, tonight for attending and providing such an important service for those watching online. Following on from that first session, we're then going to be moving to an interview session with myself and the PCS General Secretary, Fran Heathcote, and then there will be plenty of time for questions to be put to Fran about PCS's response about these cuts and the cuts agenda that we have seen so far. So without further ado, I am just going to do some very quick housekeeping. Messages of support and solidarity, please keep them coming in. We would urge members to actively participate in this event tonight. So please tell us who you are and what branch you're representing, or which part of the union you're from, which organisation you're from, and keep those messages of solidarity coming. And you should be able to see them going across the bottom of the screen throughout the evening's events. Just to let comrades know that PCS staff will be monitoring the comments across our social media channels. And just a reminder that we would ask everyone to respect those speakers tonight and when they're making their contributions, and that we will not tolerate either any abusive or discriminatory language. If anybody falls foul of that, then our PCS staff have been instructed to either delete those comments or potentially remove those individuals who are trying to disrupt the event tonight. This is such an important event, and it's so important that we get our response right to this, that we can't be sidelined in some of those issues that can sometimes happen on social media, because clearly this is a public event tonight, so we will be keeping an eye on that. And just to let people know that this is being streamed across the three channels, social media channels of PCS. So it's on Facebook, it's on X, and it's also on our YouTube channel as well. So without further ado, then we are going to now move to our first contribution for this evening, and that is to give a warm welcome to Mary Cross, who's a member of the Disabled People Against the Cuts. Mary has been an activist and disability activist for most of her life, and has been a member of DPAC for nearly 15 years. Mary is now retired, having spent most of her career involved working with disabled children, particularly in the realm of safeguarding. But Mary is also a campaigner and activist across a whole series of spheres, a passionate anti-racist, and I think it's fair to say, Mary, a passionate pro-human. So warm welcome, Mary, and over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm very grateful to be invited on behalf of DPAC and to be able to speak tonight. Even greater thank you for literally rallying to our cause. We've never felt more supported by a wide range of organisations. Our rallying call and hashtag for our day of action on Wednesday, which, by the way, will start at Downing Street at 11. Our hashtag is welfare, not warfare. And if you want more information about the day of action, please go to the DPAC website. I want also to start by acknowledging that PCS workers in DWP can be hit by these proposals twice. One, obviously, because we know there are workers there who are on PIP themselves, and two, because of having to listen to desperate calls from disabled and ill people, sometimes suicidal calls. I want to ask how a government can terrorize disabled and ill people like this and call itself Labour. I mean, that is beyond me. But I want to say that every single organisation, whether it is one representing disabled people or run by disabled people, is telling us that they are overwhelmed by their members calling, emailing, writing, saying they're absolutely petrified of the proposed changes. I think the worst of it is probably that they want to make it even harder to qualify for the PIP, which is already a traumatizing process. And I wanted to address some of the causes of the increase in applicant numbers, because ministers and the media seem unwilling to do so. So the increase in poverty caused by umpteen years of Tory rule, misrule, poverty and disability always go together. Always. Whether poverty causes impairments or impairments have the effect of causing poverty in the family because there's never enough money for the equipment and all adaptations that are needed. Two, the badly, if not criminally, mishandled pandemic. Young people being shut away in their own homes for long periods, then called back into school or college unpredictably and then sent home again. No wonder so many young people have mental health problems, and the mental health services have been dismantled. They're not there for them. And also long COVID sufferers who their existence seems to be completely denied, but they are claiming because they are chronically ill now. Clearly the destruction of the NHS, both the physical services, if you like, and the mental health services. Shocking impact on any deaf and disabled and ill people. The destruction of social care, for goodness sake, and that was always bound to increase impairments and increase illness. So whilst these most draconian are the most draconian cuts yet, in some respects, at my age, I have seen it all before. That slogan about work, how much we all ought to work. We've seen work sets you free on the Nazi death camps. Thank you very much. We're helping people. We're helping people by providing work coaches. They don't know anything about disability. They are proposing asking the employers to fund the access to work needs now. Oh, very funny. We all think that's going to work. There's a shortage of accessible and affordable transport for people to get to work. And finally, employers on the whole do not want to employ disabled people anyway. We know that. So I can only describe these proposals as evil. They're wicked when we know rich people can be taxed more and can contribute. I think I should stop there, but thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mary, for such an important contribution. And you are absolutely right that yet again, some of our most vulnerable are being targeted for swathing cuts, whilst the rich are yet again getting away with not paying their fair share. And you're absolutely right to call out the National Day of Action that DPAC organised for this coming Wednesday, the 26th. For those of you who can get to outside Downing Street for 11 o'clock on Wednesday, please do so. I will be there, so hopefully, Mary, I'll see you there on Wednesday. And please, any PCS members in and around the London area, please, we are encouraging you to support that important demonstration. So please get along there if you can. So thank you very much, Mary, for such an important contribution. Okay, then we are now going to move to our next speaker, who is Angela Grant. Angela, for those of you who don't know, is the PCS Group President in the DWP Group. Angela has worked for the department for nearly 20 years and is currently the elected Group President for DWP PCS, having previously served on that GEC as both Vice President and Group Assistant Secretary. Angela is an activist and a campaigner to the core and is leading the group's response to the latest cuts to disability benefits and the latest savage attacks that we are currently facing in that particular group. So Angela, warm welcome, and over to you. Yeah, Angela, we can't hear you, sorry. No, can't hear. Okay, what I'm going to suggest we do then, while we try and get Angela's sound sorted, we're going to move to our next speaker, who is Kim Johnson. Kim is the MP for Liverpool Riverside and is actually my MP. And Kim is the first Black MP elected in Liverpool in a constituency where she was born and still lives. Kim is committed to speaking up for all of our residents in that constituency, in what is the most diverse constituency in the city. Kim's background over the years is in the community development and in particular social adult care, and she's a lifelong trade unionist. And I've known Kim now for a number of years in a background with Unison before being elected MP. Well, Kim is also an avid supporter of PCS. She's a member of our PCS parliamentary group and can often be seen on picket lines where PCS members are taking action in defence of their conditions or for better pay. Kim, a really warm welcome, over to you.
And I'd just say thank you so much for that lovely welcome, Mart, and good evening to everybody. And I'd like to say thanks for inviting me to speak tonight. And I'm really pleased to be on a platform with some amazing activists. And I'd have to say and agree with Martin's opening comments that these are difficult times. And as a Black working class MP from Liverpool, I don't support the direction of travel, and I will continue to speak out at what I believe is austerity 2.0. And last week I challenged the minister about these proposed cuts and why she wasn't considering a wealth tax instead of going after disabled people. And I totally agree with what Mary said, welfare, not warfare. But I'd like to start by thanking PCS, who are at the forefront of challenging the government's escalating attacks on the welfare state. We heard last week Pat McFadden, who morphed into Elon Musk in terms of criticising and attacking the civil servants. And we're hearing today that the government are now proposing massive cuts right across the board, and including free school meals, which for me is immoral. It's a campaign that I've been involved in for a long time. When we are the 6th richest economy in the world and we've got kids going to school with empty bellies, this is something that we have to deal with. And I know that as PCS members, you will experience firsthand every day the devastating impact that these cuts will not only have on the people that you support, but also on some of you personally, has just been mentioned. But Liverpool, we know only too well the hardship that comes from austerity, poverty and unemployment due to deindustrialisation and government policy with Thatcher's managed decline. It's something we know and expect from the Tory government, who feather their own pockets while in power, who give away billions to their crony COVID contracts, who hollowed out our welfare state and local government until our public services were on its knees, then sold them off to run in the interest of profit, not people. Now, finally, as the first Labour government in 14 years, when we were elected last July, we thought things were going to change because we were elected on that banner of change and people had hope. But people are saying, what's going on? What's the difference between Labour now and the Tories then? And I ask very similar questions, if I'm honest with you. But 77% of the people claiming universal credit and disability benefits have gone without essential items in the last 6 months. The cut to disability support announced by the Labour government is indistinguishable from the cruelty of a Tory austerity and goes against the principle of what I believe is our party and what our party should stand for, and it will only make matters worse for those on disability benefits. Now, in Liverpool Riverside, we have some of the highest levels of poverty. And we know that most deprived constituency we are now the most deprived constituency in the country. We are the 4th highest regarding deprivation affecting older people. So cuts to PIP and universal credit on top of the winter fuel allowance will be disastrous for my constituents. And I've received many emails from panicked constituents who, since the cuts were first announced, and they have no idea what they will do if this lifeline of benefits are taken away. And these cuts are cruel and sadistic, but most of all, they are completely avoidable. And so when you've got 36 Labour MPs writing to Liz Kendall, talking about how it is a moral duty to make changes to welfare benefits, it just beggars belief in terms of where these people stand. And if we can find billions to go to war, then why can't we find the money to lift people out of poverty and enable them to have the support to go back to work if they are able, instead of forcing them deeper and deeper into poverty? Because we saw that last July when they announced the changes to the winter fuel allowance. And again, I had many emails from very, very distraught people who had that lifeline taken away from them. But these cruel cuts are based on meeting arbitrary fiscal rules, and I would say self-imposed fiscal rules by Rachel Reeves. And if she wanted to change them, she could. It's just that she chooses not to. So a wealth tax of just 2% on assets over 10 million would raise 24 billion a year, and that would enable us to do, an awful lot of things, whether that's removing the 2-child cap, universal free school meals, and ensuring that disabled and sick people live a life in dignity. But when the government talked about tough choices, why is it this choice was never on the table? We are now being briefed that the civil service will need to find 15% cuts, resulting in thousands of job losses and further decimation of frontline services after 15 years of austerity. There's no more fat left to trim. The division between the civil service back office and the front line has been magicked out of thin air by politicians keen to seem tough on benefit claimants. I know, and the public know, that more cuts means worse services. Austerity with a red rosette on it is still austerity. As I mentioned before, 2.0, and it's something that we can't afford to allow to happen. So hopefully when this comes to a vote, there'll be many who will vote it down. But DWP staff, especially on the front line of these cuts, your members already going above and beyond to run a creaking service and support people, many of whom are not able to work. There's no amount of strict conditionality and cruel sanctions will help support those who come back into work. And that the impact on people already struggling. But despite people are being provided with increasingly limited options, and frontline staff are bearing the brunt of these frustrations. And I want to take this opportunity to send my solidarity to PCS members working as security staff for G4S in job centres who have voted for strike action due to the shocking levels of violence, safety compromises and worker exploitation that they are facing. A survey by PCS showed that 81% of these workers had experienced at least one dangerous incident in the last year, with 50% experienced 4 or more. The horrific treatment of job centre staff is completely unacceptable, and it underscores the urgent need for stronger protections and safeguards for all workers. No one should ever face violence or abuse in their workplace, yet security staff and frontline workers are being left completely vulnerable. The fault of the hostile environment lies squarely with the government, whose policies are forcing people to take desperate measures and putting frontline staff in danger. The reliance on outsourced contracts prioritises cost cutting over safety, and we need to see a swift action on the promises that the biggest insourcing drive in a generation. Because I would say actions speak louder than the words. Don't just talk about it, let's do it. Because so many of staff within PCS, Austerity and other organisations are suffering. If the last government taught us anything, it's that you can't cut your way to growth. A successful economy needs high quality public services. We all rely on things like good health, good quality education and affordable childcare. Widening inequality benefits nobody except the 1%. Refusing to tax wealth will continue to leave our public services short-staffed, cash-strapped and overwhelmed. Meetings like these are so important to discuss the issues, but we all need to go away now and do our bit to organise opposition to these cruel and callous cuts and the continued penalisation of the sick and disabled that takes straight out of the Tory playbook. And I would say, as a trade unionist, guys, it's about organise, educate and agitate, because that's what we need to make change. And it's not just about me as a politician, it's about all of those stakeholder organisations, it's the trade unions all coming together and speaking with one voice to say, not in our name, and this is unacceptable. So we do need to build a strong movement from the unions to the streets to change the dangerous direction of this government and put an end to the attacks on the poorest and most vulnerable in our society. This government are looking at low-hanging fruit, and that cannot go ahead. Tax the rich, that's what we need to do. Solidarity, comrades. Welfare, not warfare. Enjoy the rest of your rally.
Brilliant, Kim. Thank you so much for such a powerful contribution, and thank you for your ongoing support for everything that we're trying to do as PCS, not just in this campaign, but in the various campaigns that we've been running over a number of years. You're never very far from one of our picket lines, and that really is, that solidarity really is so important. We just, before we actually sort of let you go, there's just one question that we've got that's come in, and specifically for you, Kim. You raised the fact about building that coalition, and also you've told us about the terrible situation in your own constituency around what your constituents are facing. But two questions really in one. One is, what sort of impact is these cuts going to have on your constituents in the community which you serve? But also as well, and what would you say to your constituents who probably are feeling anxious right now about the future and what it holds for them?
So I would say that the impact that it's likely to have is going to be devastating, because 14 years of austerity and cuts, where benefits haven't risen in line with inflation. So housing's gone up, the cost of food has gone up, energy has gone up. So people's disposable income has reduced. So having these discussions and debates about getting people back into work, and we know that people who want to work are working, because we have a situation in this country that I think it's something like 80% of people in receipt of universal credit are in work, because in work poverty is a massive issue in this country at this moment in time. And what I would say to people who are feeling anxious is, to get in touch with your MP, get in touch with your local council, get in touch with some of the very strong and active anchor organisations within your constituencies. There are people out there that can help. Go to your local library if you still have one and ask about support. But it is very much about providing people with the information that will help them, because we know all too well as well, though, Martin, that people who are entitled to benefits aren't accessing the benefits that we need, because we know, for example, that the take-up of pension credit is only something like 60%, but people aren't accessing it for a number of reasons, and that might be down to not being able to get online. The form is 20 pages long, there's 200 questions, and a lot of people who find themselves at this moment in time, are experiencing digital poverty. So when I have access to some of that stuff, but it is about finding out what's going on in people's own local areas, because, there will be lots of work happening, across the board, whether it's the council, go to organisations, contact the CAB, all of those organisations. But sadly, what I would say also is that the system has been developed to make it difficult for people to access. And so we're talking about the need and the necessity for auto enrolment in a lot of these schemes, so that people don't constantly have to jump through hoops, but rest assured though, Mart, I, as the MP for Liverpool Riverside, will constantly be battering this back to the government and will not be supporting it, even though there are lots in the party, lots of MPs at the moment that think it is acceptable. They say, as I mentioned earlier, a moral choice. It's not a moral choice. What is a moral choice is lifting people out of poverty, giving people a better standard of life and living, and not making their lives worse.
Okay, brilliant, Kim. Thank you so much for your time, and also for those powerful words tonight, and your contribution and your ongoing support for everything the PCS do. Thank you so much, Kim.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your evening, guys. Thanks. Bye.
Cheers. Okay then, comrades, we are now going to move back to, hopefully, we're expecting Angela's sound to be okay now. So we are going to give it over to Angela again. Warm welcome, Angela. I did the introductions before, but over to you.
Okay, can you hear me? Yes, thank you. Apologies for that, everybody. I did do a sound check before. I don't know why, it just disappeared when I came on. And I did start by saying, first of all, thanks to the National Union for inviting the group along. I think it's really, really important that we are here, because this directly impacts on the members in DWP, as has been said. But I do want to thank Mary for her sorry, now I've got feedback from in the corner, because we've got two different laptops in case it went off. Apologies, don't worry, it's fine. Okay, yes, so I did want to thank Mary for her passionate contribution, and again, to send our solidarity from PCS, but from DWP Group in particular, to all that are struggling with people with disabilities. Anybody that feels now that this government is not supporting them for welfare, for benefit. And I always say, nobody fares well. Why do we call it welfare? And there's no benefit in it, although a lot of people think there is. There is no benefit in what should be a social security service. So thank you for your contribution, Mary, and to send solidarity for Kim, because you are saying all the things that we expect to hear from a Labour MP, Kim. Of course, we want to see a Labour Party that lives to the socialist policies that it was created to support and to implement, and that is not what we are seeing here. I don't think any of us thought that the Labour Party were going to come over the hill and fix all the ills that the previous administration have created. But what we did expect was a little bit of support for the most vulnerable in this country, not to be pulling the rug from from people that are already living in dire circumstances. The last thing that we need to see are more cases going to court of people that are dying without any food in their bellies. And what we are looking at here is that now predominantly happening to those that have mental health conditions, to young people that will have their benefit cut, to people with disabilities that will have their money cut, but also where the assessment for PIP will be more difficult. So there will be people that are in work, even, not just those that are unable to work, but those that need that PIP payment to keep them in work. Those benefits will be affected also. How is that acceptable from a Labour government? So, how does it work for DWP members? I think it was mentioned by Kim when I was trying to get the sound back on. And Mary as well, that for those that work in DWP, for massive numbers of DWP members, the benefit system, any cuts will affect them doubly, but it affects them because it will affect them both sides of the desk. We have so many of our staff that are actually claiming universal credit. Now, what does that speak to? It speaks to what universal credit was all about when it first came in, because when we talk about people that are, receiving payments from the public purse because they don't have enough money to live on, what universal credit did was not just look at the benefit system, but also the tax credit system. So it pulled in tax credit, it pulled in working tax credit, it pulled in child tax credit, it pulled in housing benefit. So if you want to now start paying housing benefit, child tax credit and working tax credit from the benefit part, from the universal credit part, of course the money's going to go up, isn't it? Of course the bill is going to be higher. If you didn't want the higher bill, why have you made a universal credit pot where you've pulled in from all of these different areas? So that means that there are almost 40%, I think the last count was 38%, of people that are claiming benefit that are looked at as scroungers because they have to claim from the public purse, that previously would have been getting their money from the tax office, but now they're on benefit. So how does that work? How are we making work pay? That's a question I would be asking Rachel Reeves and Liz Kendall. How are we making work pay when those that are in work are having to claim because their pay is so low, they're on poverty wages? From private sector employees is bad enough, but from government who have workers in the Department for Work and Pensions and other government officers across the civil service, where we are seeing people that are working having to claim benefit because they are on poverty wages. The national living wage, pennies above the national living wage, can't pay their rent. Housing benefit would have come from the city council previously. Now they have to claim universal credit. Then they are stigmatised, and they are stigmatised by a government that should actually be supporting them. And, this is what we expected from a Labour government. We didn't expect all the ills to be cured, no, but we did expect a bit of support. And then we see our members then as workers having to, coming into DWP, and I know I certainly did, and thousands and thousands of others, we come into DWP to bring support to those that need it. Told when you started work that everybody that comes through the door, you support them. If they need help for their children, you support them. If they need a crisis loan, if they are in crisis, you support them. Now what do we see? No crisis fund. There's no crisis fund was moved into city council. Housing benefit came into UC. Crisis loans went out to city councils, and there is no ring fence money for crisis. How does that work? So how is this government now expecting to lower the benefit bill without putting people who are in poverty actually out of their homes, because they will not be able to afford to live? So our members are now trying to deliver a service with a government that is saying that we need to cut staff. We know that members in our job centres are working with up to 2,000 in their caseload, up to 2,000 cases in their workload, and yet we're told that we need to cut jobs in the civil service. How are you going to make that work? They talk about squaring a circle. Well, that circle cannot be squared, can it? We're looking at the safety issues that are happening in our job centre. You start cutting benefit and you start raising the frustrations of people that have no money. What will they do? The job centre is the front face of the Department for Work and Pensions. So our members will be sitting at their desks with people coming in with their frustrations, and we will see the worst flashpoints. We're already seeing a massive number of what they call fast tracks. Fast tracks are serious incidents in job centres. As the fast tracks are growing, DWP is cutting security. So what happens to the staff in that situation, and what happens to the claimants that are coming in, service users coming into our offices, into our job centres, in those really dire circumstances where they are becoming places of danger? They become a place of danger. We have a mental health crisis already within our staff in the Department for Work and Pensions. Our members are going off sick. The levels of sickness are rising exponentially, and we have to stop that. We cannot stop it by cutting benefit. So in the short time we have here, we cannot fix a lot of this, but Kim was right. We have to do more of this. We have to be on the front foot with this, and the DWP group are already on the front foot with this. We are totally supportive of every single person that needs to have some payment when they are trying to get themselves back into work, unable to work at that time, payments at the point of need, and certainly ensuring that we have got payments in place for people with disabilities. So I'll leave that there. Thanks, Martin. You're on mute now.
Thank you, Angela, for that powerful contribution, excellent contribution. I mean, obviously, you've already written to Liz Kendall, and we still await a response. But very quickly, I've just got a message to the Minister for DWP about getting around the table with PCS.
I certainly have. See, I didn't have enough time. I would have covered all of that. Yeah, we've already written, as soon as the government took office, we did write to Liz Kendall as the Minister for DWP, and we asked her to come and meet with PCS, because our members in DWP know how the service should be run. You know, why would you not consult with the union whose members are delivering a service? So we want Liz Kendall. I know she met with yourself, Mars. I think she was late for the meeting, turned up for about 5 minutes, and you had a very quick conversation with her. It's not good enough, is it? I know she promised John McDonnell that she would come and meet with PCS. We are still waiting for that meeting to happen, but we are writing to her again, and we are now. We requested a meeting. We will now be demanding a meeting with the Minister for the department. We've met with the Minister for Transformation. He took some of our issues away. We are still waiting for some feedback from that, but we are now demanding that Liz Kendall gets around the table, sits with our union, with the leaders in our group, and that we can thrash some of this out so that we can make sure that this works, because we cannot see the failings that are about to happen, because failures and cuts mean death. It actually means that people will die. We've seen it before, and we do not want to see that again. So please, to Liz Kendall, Liz, get around the table and let's have a conversation. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Ange, for that, and thanks for all the brilliant work that our reps and activists in the DWP group are doing to support this campaign. Okay then, comrades, we're now going to move on to our next speaker, and it really does give me great pleasure to introduce Sarah Woolley. Sarah is the General Secretary for the Bakers, Food and Allies Workers Union, having been elected as General Secretary, the first woman General Secretary of that union in 2019, and I'm seeing it screen going around in front of me. Sarah is a fantastic campaigner and a brilliant supporter, not only of our union, but in wider community campaigns, and some of the brilliant work that she's been doing about the right to food with Ian Byrne MP as well is really inspiring and powerful. So Sarah, a warm welcome, and the meeting's yours.
Thanks ever so much, Martin, for the invitation to join the rally, and apologies I missed the first few speakers. I was finishing up another meeting. I'll keep my contribution brief. We released a statement on Friday about the announcements that were made by the government last week, so I will focus on that statement if that's okay, as it sets out our Executive Council's position, and then I will hopefully won't be repeating what's already been said that I didn't hear. The Bakers, Food and Allied Workers Union strongly condemns the UK government's latest assault on disabled people, which includes our members, as I've just heard that it includes yours as well, Martin. It's just, the assault is just cruel and it is dangerous, as Angela just outlined. These cuts disguised as support are nothing more than an attempt to force disabled people into work, regardless of whether it is safe, suitable, or even sustainable. And this policy is going to push thousands and thousands of people deeper into poverty, worsen health inequalities, and strip away the dignity and security that everyone deserves, as we haven't already seen that happen over the last 15 years through austerity. The government claims that work is the best route out of poverty, yet its own statistics tell a different story, with 1.8 million people suffering from work-related ill health, record levels of workplace stress, and tens of millions of working days lost to injury and illness. It is clear that many jobs are unsafe, unsustainable, and actively harming workers. And rather than investing in safe workplaces, proper adjustments, and stronger rights for disabled people, the government is instead shamefully cutting the vital support that allows people to survive, and a government that is supposed to represent working people at that. By removing the work capability assessment and weakening disability benefits, ministers are not helping disabled people into meaningful work. They are coercing them into unsuitable, insecure, and exploitative employment. At the same time, the Health and Safety Executive has seen its enforcement powers eroded. This is going to allow employers to get away with dangerous conditions that disproportionately harm disabled workers. The mental health crisis in workplaces is already at catastrophic levels, with stress, depression, and anxiety accounting for over half of all work-related ill health cases. And rather than addressing this crisis, the government is piling on more pressure, forcing people into jobs that will make their health worse, while removing the safety nets that exist to protect them. This government's approach is absolutely not about empowering disabled people. It is about cutting costs at the expense of the most vulnerable people in our society. And the BFAWU stands in absolute solidarity with disabled people who are being targeted by these cruel policies. And we have got a few demands. We want a real commitment to workplace safety through stronger enforcement of health and safety laws, but also resourcing the Health and Safety Executive to be able to hold employers accountable. Employer accountability for mental health and accessibility to ensure that disabled workers have the adjustments that they need. They're not forced out of work or forced into practices that are going to make their illnesses worse. A secure and fair benefits system, not one that punishes people for being unwell or disabled, and recognition that not everyone can work, and that's absolutely okay. People deserve to live with dignity, whether they are in employment or whether they are not. Because disabled people are not a burden. They are not a statistic to be fixed for budget calculations. They are human beings who deserve respect, safety and support, and we will continue to fight alongside them, and we will continue to call on the wider labour movement to oppose these dangerous policies with all our strength. And we also stand with your member Martin in PCS, who for some, as Angela said, will not only be impacted by the cuts personally, but also by the plans for further significant funding cuts to departments on top of 15 years of underfunding. As we know, it's going to be catastrophic. It's not going to help anybody. And we also send solidarity to those who are already going above and beyond. I've been looking in the comments whilst waiting to come on. There are many people in your union, Martin, that are already going above and beyond to facilitate a service that isn't fit for purpose, that is hanging on by a thread after the underfunding of the last 15 years, and that's been stripped back to its bones. I mean, how can they even think that they can strip it back anymore? And we know that these people are already burning out due to dealing with all the issues Angela outlined. Nobody goes to work to be attacked or end up ill as a result of it. So we do stand not only in solidarity with the disabled people that are being attacked by these vicious policies, but also with your members too. And as always, if there's anything we can do in the BFAWU, you only have to shout, Martin, and we'll be right there by your side. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sarah, not just for attending tonight and that, again, incredibly important words there, but for everything that you're doing in the movement right now. You are an absolute campaigner in a truest sense of the word, and you're never, away from picket lines, but also campaigning events as well. It would be remiss of me not to specifically thank you for the brilliant work that you've been doing in leading in the movement alongside Ian Byrne, you know, in the Right to Food campaign, such an important campaign, but also as well now in the light of these latest cuts, you know, is going to be even more important in the weeks ahead. And you're certainly never far away from supporting our members on those picket lines. So solidarity to you and to your union, and thank you for everything you do. And we are going to move on now. But brilliant. Thank you very much for tonight. Okay, we are moving on then, comrades, to our final speaker in this session, and then we will be moving into sort of a Q&A with our General Secretary, Frank Heathcote. So again, it gives me great pleasure to introduce and welcome John McDonnell, who is the chair of the PCS Parliamentary Group. I think you've been here in that role once or twice before, John, over the years. But John is an absolute stalwart, you know, of our parliamentary group. And again, like all the speakers tonight, is always there for PCS, is always there to raise our banner and raise the issues on behalf of our members. For those of you who don't know, John is the Syrian MP for Hayes and Harlington, and has been since 1997. And was a former Shadow Chancellor from 2015 to 2020. And, you know, specifically, I know he'll want me to mention this, but he was born in Liverpool, so being a fighter is probably in his DNA. So, John, over to you.
Thanks, Martin. It certainly is. I've listened to all the speeches, and it's been really moving. I don't want to cover all the ground that they have, but I can't. I'm trying to come to terms with what's happened over this last week, because I can't tell you how angry I am. I'm so angry. I don't know. I feel like kicking the furniture or something. I've had lots of letters, emails from constituents since the announcement on the disability cuts, and you could weep at some of them. You could absolutely weep. I'll just give you a flavour of one that came in today. There's a woman who just. She says, I've been on PIP for around 18 years when it was DLA. And it's because of my health issues, but my health has deteriorated. How can they justify taking away the support I have? I'm sick. I don't have an individual 4 points on a particular activity. So that means under the new rules, she won't get PIP. And this is what upsets me, really. What she says is, I'm very scared and anxious person. I'm getting so many emails like that. People are terrified what's going to happen to them. I've got people who've got all sorts of physical conditions and also mental health conditions. I've got people who are neurodiverse with a range of challenges in their life where they just need support. They just need support. They just need some help to get by. And what's happening is that the government is going to kick that help away. And I can't tell you how distressing it is to talk to some of the people affected. You'll know them, you deal with them. They'll be members of your family. And I was saying at the weekend in one interview, I said to someone, asked me about, I think it was LBC, I think it was. And I said, look, if you close your eyes and I'll read out some policies that the government has introduced. They've cut the winter fuel payment to pensioners. They've refused to lift 500,000 children out of poverty by scrapping the 2-child limit. They've cut overseas aid that goes to people actually starving in the global south. And now they're taking £5 billion worth of cuts out of disabled people. So if you close your eyes and then you listen to those policies, you wouldn't believe it's a Labour government that's been elected. You just wouldn't believe it. This isn't what Labour stands for. It's not what the Labour Party was founded for. It's not what any Labour government has ever done in the past. We fought for 14 years to get rid of the Tories because of their implementation of austerity. This is austerity. It's back. And I keep saying to colleagues here, the party will be branded, and every individual MP and every party member who supports this will be branded as people who are inflicting austerity on our people. And I can't understand the logic of it. All right, the economy is not growing fast enough. And Martin will tell you that we've done various reports about how you invest in the economy, but actually it takes time for that investment to pay off. And that what you do is in that investment will eventually grow the economy. But the best thing to do is always put money in people's pockets so they can spend. It increases demand, and that's how you actually grow the economy quickly. It's just basic economics. That's why I don't understand why they don't understand this now. So what they've decided, just like the Tories, if the economy isn't growing fast enough and they're not getting the scale of the tax revenues they want, instead of putting money in people's pockets so they can spend and the economy demand grows and then they get the taxation, they've got a choice. They either, if it's not growing fast enough, they either increase taxation or borrow some more, or they make cuts, austerity. And I never thought I'd see the day when a newly elected Labour government in particular would go down the path of savage cuts. And I'm shocked. We've been arguing from the union. The PCA parliamentary group was set up years ago by the union, so we have a voice in Parliament. So what we've been doing as a group for some time now is to say there is an alternative to all this. And many of your speakers, Kim and others, have said it eloquently, really. You don't have to cut, not when you've got the vast wealth in this country that we've got. All you have to do is introduce a fair taxation system. So everybody pays their way and shoulders the burden of what we need. And the argument that Keir Starmer said, the broadest shoulders should shoulder the heaviest burden. And I fully agree with that. But that's not what the government's doing. So what we've been advocating as a union says, look, all you have to do now is introduce a fair taxation program, which is, people have mentioned it, increasing capital gains tax, the money that people get from business interests and the dividends, to the level of income tax, just level it out so it's all equal, we're all equal. One of the ideas was introduce a sort of capital gains tax, because the City of London, the financial services are booming at the moment. Do you know the bankers' bonuses are at record levels this year? So they're making a fortune. So just introduce what we call a financial transaction tax. It's called the Robin Hood tax. It's a small adjustment to stamp duty on share taxation. That's all. And then others have said, a group called the Patriotic Millionaires have come together and they've said, you should tax us more. Just introduce a relatively light 2% wealth tax. And that all of those would bring in the money and you wouldn't have to have any cuts in benefits whatsoever. In fact, you'd be able to improve them. You'd be able to increase them. But the government's refused that. So I've said to them also, we've said, if you don't believe in taxation, well, one thing you could help us with is you could start introducing some controls, rent controls, controlling energy prices, and then also actually reviewing what's happening with regard to food, because there's all the evidence there is now is that food prices being forced up by what we call gouging. It's profiteering, basically. So all of those solutions are readily available, but the government's not willing to take them. We'll see what happens on Wednesday when the Chancellor gets up and makes a spring statement. But I want to make everyone absolutely clear, and I've said this to the government and I've said it to ministers, I want them absolutely clear. If they don't go down the route of creating a fairer society, that means having a fairer taxation system to pay for the services we need, which in effect in itself will help in growing the economy as we need it, and they go along the line of austerity and cuts, I won't be voting for it. I've made it clear. I doubt if any member of the PCS parliamentary group will want to vote for it. And it won't be just a matter of voting in Parliament. I'll be on every demonstration, every picket line, every direct action that will be taking place by disabled people, trade unionists and groups that are being impacted by this, because I'm not going to sit back. I'm not going to sit back while I'm receiving emails, as I say, that from desperate people that are so distressing that it gets across to you that these benefit cuts could destroy people's lives. We, as a union, we were raising in Parliament for a number of years that the government should monitor the impact of what the Tories were doing then in terms of cutting benefits to people, particularly people with disabilities. And they refused to. But we discovered actually secretly there was some monitoring going on, but they wouldn't publish the reports. Then eventually we got the reports published, and we discovered there were 600 people who basically took their lives as a result of the actions of cutting their benefits. And I'll always remember the young man up in Leith in Scotland who never left a suicide note. He simply laid beside him the letter he received cutting his benefit, and he couldn't cope anymore. I'm not going to stand by and allow a Labour government to reintroduce that. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to fight all I can. And I know everyone listening to this will feel the same way. We've got to stop this. We've got to end austerity. And as a union, we can be a powerful voice in doing that. Solidarity.
Brilliant, John. Thank you so much for not only the emotion of that contribution, but also that absolutely and vitally important message towards the end there about our it's, you know, this isn't a choice. This is something that we have to fight and campaign against and stop. And thank you for everything that you continue to do on behalf of our PCS members, but also as well on behalf of the public, because our members want to provide that absolutely first class and so vital public service to some of the most vulnerable in our community. So thank you so much for your contribution tonight, John, and I look forward to seeing you in those campaigning forums in the weeks and months ahead, although it is an absolute disgrace that we have to. Cheers, John. Thank you. Okay then, comrades, we are going to move on to our final session now. But just before we do, we've just a reminder, if you do keep the messages of support and solidarity coming, and they will get flashed up across the bottom of the screen. And thank you for all of those who are engaging and interacting online as well during this period. So we are going to move on to our final session of the evening now, which is a slight departure from the first session, which clearly has been a rally-based one. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome our General Secretary, Fran Heathcote, to tonight's event. And just before we get into some of the detail that's been coming through in the questions that have been sent in, Fran, and just really, I wonder if you could give just your initial thoughts as to what has been a very intense sort of 72 hours or so. I know you've done a lot of media over the weekend, especially in light since Rachel Reeves' announcement about the cuts to the civil service over the weekend. But even before that, you know, the devastating cuts and the impact that's going to have on the disability benefits in particular. So just want to give your first initial thoughts on where we're at and where we go next.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. And good evening, everybody. Can I just say, without really planning to, this has become a really well-timed event, because they say, don't they, a week's a long time in politics. So when we planned this event, it was very much around the campaign that PCS would need to mount to oppose the cuts to disabled people's benefits. And of course, that is something we're absolutely committed to doing. So it's really heartwarming to share a platform with the speakers who've spoken tonight, all of whom are united in their willingness to be part of that campaign, which is one that we obviously have to mount. But of course, in the last 72 hours, as Martin said, this has ramped up, hasn't it, because of the announcements that the government have made now around the civil service. And when I think a number of speakers have described this as austerity 2 or austerity 2.0, as Kim described it, it really is. And you know, for those of us who've been around a while, I think back to Gordon Brown when he made his announcement around 104,000 civil service job cuts, and that all of that would be done by cutting backroom services, and there would be no real impact to the front line. And what followed that was absolute chaos, because of course, anybody who's ever had any dealings in frontline services will tell you that you cannot cut backroom services without having an impact on the front line. So when people talk about what might sound attractive in terms of getting rid of, you know, bureaucracy, getting rid of waste, what do we actually mean by that? Because we know, don't we, that people wait too long on the phone. They wait too long to see a job centre advisor, and then their appointments are cut short. If they've been the victim of a crime, they wait till 2027 before they can get a court hearing. And of course, the asylum numbers are growing all the time, meaning longer stays in hotels, which of course plays right into the right-wing media rhetoric around the impact of asylum and immigration in the UK today. So all of those things are the consequence of what have been over 15 years now of public service cuts. So when we talk about we will just make cuts and they will just be to the back of house and it won't really impact on frontline services, that is a nonsense. What nobody has tried to explain is which bits won't get done anymore, which bits won't be, won't be dealt with in what we know is an already stretched civil service. We know, don't we, that there are not enough staff. We would argue we need more staff, not less, in order to deliver the vital services that our members deliver to the public. And as long as I've been an activist, which is 30 odd years, system or campaign rather, against austerity and against the cuts that various governments have tried to impose, because our members recognise that actually there is a huge room for division in this arena. It's very easy to pit a job centre worker against a benefit claimant, or to say to a disabled worker, it's those civil servants that are doing this to you. But in fact, our members recognise, and because of the work that PCS has done with various campaign groups, hopefully a lot of campaigners now recognise that in fact the source of the attacks is the same source, whether you're a worker in low paid work, and as other speakers already articulated, I think it was Angela said, in some departments up to 40% of our membership are entitled to receive the benefits which they process. That's a shocking statistic, but it's one that's very, very real in PCS. And of course, benefit claimants, whilst they instinctively don't like the decisions that are being made, we need to unite with them with everything we've got to ensure the biggest, most joined up campaign possible. For as long as I've been going to the TUC, we've put motions to the TUC which have been agreed unanimously, calling for a joined up campaign in defence of social security. We don't call it welfare reform, as Angela articulated. It's very much about providing a safety net, a decent standard of living, below which nobody should be allowed to fall. And if we're going to do that, we need as much unity and solidarity as possible to muster, and we need to work with the biggest coalition possible. So this is a really serious attack. Let's have a think about the announcements that were made over the weekend then. So they've said there would be 15% cuts to civil service administration budgets by the end of the decade. So in other words, by 2030, a 15% cut. So we are, because there hasn't really been consultation about any of this, we're in the business now of saying to the people who've made those announcements, let's sit down and talk about that. What does that actually mean? Are you talking about natural wastage? Are you talking about a package? Are you talking about cuts to services? Are the bits of the system that you won't be carrying out because you won't have enough staff to do that? What does that 15% administration budget cut actually mean in the civil service? And of course, if you look at the media, it's been portrayed in a number of different ways. Some people are saying 15% of cuts to the admin budget. Some people are saying 10,000 job cuts, and some people are saying 50,000 job cuts, depending which newspaper you read. But what remains at the core of all of this is an attack on disabled people is an attack on trade unionists, and an attack on trade unionists is an attack on disabled people. The attacks come from the same source, and so we will need to mount the biggest campaign possible in order to defeat them. But clearly, there has been a lot said in the last 48 hours, I would say, about what this would actually look like. And that's the detail that we need to get into. What we've been told is that permanent secretaries will be told that they have to find a 15% cut in their admin budgets. Now, the problem when you pick an arbitrary figure out of the air like that is it impacts differently in different departments. So what is the detail of that? What does that look like? And which bits are you going to deliver and which bits aren't you going to deliver? Because as John McDonnell has just really articulately explained, there are lots of ways that you can boost the economy: a fair taxation system, the ability to ensure that those with the broadest shoulders can pay the cost. We would say there are a number of things that you could do that help the working class rather than help the rich, and don't put money in the pockets of the poor. Don't cut the top ups to universal credit by £47 a week. Don't restrict eligibility to personal independent payments. Let's think about what personal independent payments are. Those are payments that enable people to work. So if this government is about getting more people into work and enabling people to work, then that is a really false economy, isn't it? Because if you cut the ability to enable those people to work, then of course, in turn, unemployment goes up at the same time as our members are, if rumours are to be believed, are placed on the dole queue. So we really need to get the detail of what this actually means, and then react with the biggest campaign possible. There is so many untold aspects to what has been announced that we really now need to mount a campaign to deal with all of this. I mean, we talk a lot about the DWP, obviously the department that administers social security benefits. But when people join the DWP, certainly when I joined 30 years ago, I joined because I wanted to help people. And that was the ethos at that time, that you were there to help people, not to trip them up. And I think that we would do well to remember that. One of the things that PCS has always tried to do is articulate a vision for not just what we don't want to see, but what would be a good alternative. So in the case of Social Security, we produced that over 10 years ago now, and we're in the process of updating that in light of more recent events. That shouldn't be revolutionary, by the way. What do we need in order to provide that safety net for people who need it? We've always tried to build relationships with the people that we serve, as I say. So we work with DPAC, really pleased to hear tonight from Mary. We work with Black Triangle, we work with the Unemployed Workers Combine, we work with so many different welfare organisations to try and ensure that there is no division. And in the next few weeks, we are going to be working with DPAC and with other trade unions and with MPs and anybody else to defeat that green paper. Because let's remember, at this stage, that is a green paper. It's these are only briefings about what the government intends to do in relation to job cuts. It's not yet law. So when George Osborne and Ian Duncan Smith came forward with similar cuts back in 2016, they were defeated, and we can do that again. And Rachel Reeves and Liz Kendall can be defeated again, but that will require the biggest and most united campaign. When Gordon Brown announced his 104,000 civil service job cuts, he never delivered that total because we stood up against it in the broadest coalition possible. We built alliances in order to defend our members. So there is a lot we could do. I don't think anybody should feel defeated or downhearted, but the key to it is to build in the biggest campaign. So I'm really pleased that people have tuned in tonight, because this is the start of what will have to be a huge campaign in defence of everything that this government is setting out, unfortunately, as its agenda for the period ahead. Thank you, Martin.
Okay, brilliant. Cheers, Fran. Just a couple of other things to go through before we finish. Obviously, I'm conscious of the time, so we haven't got that long. But you've mentioned there, and other speakers have mentioned there tonight, about the sort of the double impact this has on PCS members, if you like, on both sides of the desk. And clearly, our members have shown time and time again that they are desperate to provide support to the most vulnerable in their communities. But at the same time, now they've got this worry about what the future holds for them in terms of their work and their jobs. So what would your message be, both from to our members who desperately want to provide good services, but are having the rug pulled from under their feet in doing so, but equally at the same time having to come in to provide those services with a real uncertain future potentially over them? What would your message to them be?
My message would be that now is the most important time to get involved in your union. And by that, I mean, the more people that are involved, the more people that play a part in the campaign, the stronger we'll be and the better chance we'll have of defeating the government in terms of what they're seeking to do. I think if you recognise the reality, obviously the media will portray civil servants as being overpaid, bureaucrats wearing bowler hats and drinking tea. But the reality is, as I say, that 40% of our members are entitled to claim benefits. We have a situation where the national minimum wage goes up in April next week, and a number of our members, tens of thousands of our members, in fact, in the biggest departments, will fall below that national minimum. So let's have a dialogue with the government about what proper public services look like, what investment in public services look like, and how there is an alternative. And I think if we all play our part in doing that, so that when I meet with ministers, and that is one thing you can say about this government, they are meeting us. That's a marked departure from the previous administration. We're having regular dialogue with them. So let's have a regular dialogue about this and what it actually means, what's the reality of what those headline figures are that they've announced, and how can we work together to provide a better system that safeguards our members' jobs. So if we could mount a campaign that resulted in a no compulsory redundancy guarantee, are there other ways of getting figures down that don't result in job cuts to our members? That's a dialogue, that's a discussion. That, you know, the union is not against modernisation, but it has to be modernisation that is done in full consultation with the union, that protects our members, that defends their jobs, that gives them a decent rate of pay for doing important jobs, not just for our members themselves, but the public that use our services. So there is a load of stuff we can do. I think this is just the beginning. What we've heard tonight is a range of speakers, whether it's Mary, Angela, Kim, Sarah, or John, all saying the same thing, and that is that there is a campaign that we can mount that defends our members, defends the public that we serve, and allows us to build a better and stronger social security system. That's what this government needs to recognise, that there will be a united campaign of opposition. Is that really what they want, you know, so early on in their tenure, to get into an immediate dispute, not just with our union, but with everybody who has an interest in decent public services? So lots and lots we can do, and lots and lots we can join together to campaign about.
Yeah, cheers, Fran. And perhaps finally, you mentioned here about building a coalition, and you quite rightly mentioned DPAC, Black Triangle, Unite Community, Unemployed Workers Combine, and all of these other campaigning groups that we will continue to work with, and we have a proud history of doing so.
Yep.
In terms of the wider trade union movement, obviously we've had Sarah here tonight, which is fantastic. I mean, the General Secretary at Address the Platform. But where do we go, or what do we expect now from both the TUC, but also what role can trades councils play in this campaign?
Okay, that's a really good question, actually. And already I've had messages of support from other trade unionists, from you know, leaders of other trade unions, but also from the TUC itself, saying, you know, what can we do? How can we support you in the campaign? As I say, we have always had a policy in the TUC of the widest, most joined up campaign possible to defend social security. So that's the headline. But that, of course, doesn't just impact civil servants. It impacts everybody within the public sector. And it's quite clear that whilst you might call it something different in other unions or in other work areas, if we all have broadly the same issues, which are decent public services, fair pay, proper taxation system, and defence of jobs, then there is the ability to have the broadest and widest campaign possible. And that is something that would terrify any government, because whilst, you know, it's often been the case that you might have one union campaigning on one issue over here, and then over there another union doing something else. These are issues that unite people. They unite the public that use our services, as you heard from Mary tonight. They unite public sector workers. There is the huge potential for that joined up campaign activity that I think will be necessary in order to not just defeat what the government are seeking to do, but also to push them back and make them realise that if they proceed with this agenda, there will be widespread opposition. And of course, what's really at stake here is what happens at the next general election, because in the past, it's often been the Tories versus Labour. We now have the real spectre of reform and the far right and what that might look like. And so there is a real impetus on all of us to unite around a campaign to defend public services, certainly, but also not just our members, but the people who use the services, and the ability to tell this government that we will not stand by and watch public services being destroyed. And if that's the agenda for this new Labour government, then they will have a real battle on their hands. Thank you.
Okay, brilliant, Fran. Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for all your questions, which I've tried to collate into just some general points there to allow Fran to respond to as many as we could. There's a whole load of others that we couldn't get to tonight because we've been absolutely overwhelmed with a number of questions, but I've made a note of all of these and we will make sure that our communications cover all of these absolutely key issues and questions that the people have got. So without further ado, really, we are drawing to a close now. So I just in closing, I want to say, first of all, thank you to everyone who's attended tonight online to watch this really important rally. As Fran and others have said, that this is such a crucial period in this campaign, not just for PCS, but for everybody who uses the services provided by PCS members, especially in the DWP and the Social Security with the cuts to benefits to both the sick and the disabled, and as well as to universal credit as well. This campaign is not over tonight. This is not all about tonight, the be all and end all. This is very much a step in that campaign. As Frank quite rightly said, we've already been working on the new narrative for Social Security, what sort of Social Security system we would like to see moving forward, but also as well on tax justice and our taxation. Tomorrow night we'll be in Parliament launching our Safe Routes policy as well in Parliament. All absolutely key issues that our members face both in their working lives but also in their daily lives as well. And so really, just in closing, I want to give a huge shout out and thanks to all of our speakers tonight: Mary, Kim, Angela, Sarah, John, and obviously Fran. And a special thank you, as always, to Nikki Evans, our BSL interpreter, who provides such a fantastic support for these events. We really couldn't do these without you. So thank you so much, Nikki. I suppose the takeaway from tonight is watch this space in terms of the detail about what all these cuts mean in reality, both to our members, but also to the public and to the services that our members provide. But a very clear and strong message that we are not going to be silent on this. We are going to be absolutely in opposition to these cuts because they not only impact our members' working lives and potentially make that an uncertain future for tens of thousands of PCS members, but absolutely the services that our members cherish so much and work so hard to provide to some of the most vulnerable are at risk as a result of these cuts. And the benefit cuts will have a devastating impact, as we've already heard tonight. So thank you again for your contributions tonight. Simple message from PCS is this: that if you genuinely want to boost the economy, if you want to grow the economy, if you want to make people's working lives better, but also you want to put more money in people's pockets to give them a better standard of living, you don't do that by cutting benefits to the most vulnerable in society. You certainly don't do that by slashing resources to public services. You do that by investing in all those things. So solidarity, thank you very much for your contributions tonight. And I look forward to working with every single one of you in the weeks and months ahead as we campaign to win and stop these cuts in the tracks. Thank you and good night.